Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're tuning in. This is our Christmas Day edition, day after Christmas edition of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I once again today have the pleasure of hosting this show with Bentley. How are you doing, bud?
I'm good, dude. I'm good. We were just chatting in the pre-show lobby. I'm as scatterbrained as scatterbrained gets these days, but I'm here. I'm here,
Yeah.
and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. How was your Christmas Day viewing experience? Because I just saw the stat before we hopped on. I kind of gave you the forewarning that I'd bring it up, but viewership was up 84%, literally a week after we discussed the fact that viewership was down across the board, right? So we
Yeah.
weren't just bashing the NBA for watchability or any of the reasons we gave. It was facts that viewership was down big numbers, 25% year over year at times throughout the season. And yesterday, we actually had 84% higher viewing than in 2023. I want to throw it your way because you had a really interesting take on it, and I think you're pretty close to like ground truth in terms of why I would also think that viewership was down over last year. Because just as a reminder for folks, last year was the first time we had Christmas Day games not on a Sunday for the NFL in a very, very long time. And historically speaking, the NBA has focused very heavily on Christmas Day, putting superstars against superstars, big teams against big teams. Like we've gotten Steph LeBron a bunch. We've gotten Warriors when it was the Warriors Cavs and it was the dynasty and all that. And we get the Celtics a lot. We get the Lakers a lot. We get big teams, big names, big stars on Christmas Day because that's the NBA invests a lot in their Christmas Day experience. Last year was the first year that the NFL said we are going to put a focus on Christmas Day for games, not on Sunday, right? Sometimes we would get Christmas Day football, but it would be when it was a Sunday or if there was a standalone game on a Monday or Thursday, etc. So I think that is a big reason why they took a hit. But you mentioned why maybe the rebound happened this year, the rubber band effect. So I want to throw it your way.
Yeah, well, kind of twofold, right? The NFL games yesterday, not very compelling, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
I get that the Chiefs and Steelers drive ratings. Those are needle movers in terms of franchises in the NFL. Those teams are fucking boring to watch. Like, for as much as I love Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're not exciting to watch.
No.
And then the second game, Ravens Texans was 31-2. Like that's
action.
Yeah, that's as uncompelling as you can get in the NFL, right?
Yep.
So pair that with them putting the early game, at least. I don't even know if
they both were on.
They both were on. They were on fucking Netflix.
Yep.
So you eliminate the possibility for folks with one TV in their house to flip channels back and forth from basketball to football, right? Which is what a lot of people do on Christmas Day.
Yep.
Over the I guess really just last year, or like you said, if it's a Sunday.
Right.
You eliminate that possibility because you literally have to switch applications on your TV. And if the games are not compelling in the NFL,
you ain't going
why?
back.
Yeah, like I'm not going to do all the quote unquote work required to switch back to the NFL game when I could just check it on my phone, right? And the NBA does a really good job, like you mentioned, of putting their biggest faces on Christmas Day. And they have 5 games all back to back to back. And it's a Christmas tradition to just sit on the couch after you finish presents, right? And just watch basketball all day long and veg out. People still kind of view Christmas Day as the unofficial start to the season for NBA. I think it probably should be the official start to the season for NBA, but that's just me. Play about 65 games, call it a year.
Yeah.
So getting more people
with the NFL as much either.
Exactly. Yeah. We wouldn't have to have that tough conversation we had last week of why the ratings are down.
Right.
But I'm not a genius. I don't know things to be for certain, but that's kind of the two-headed reason why I think that the ratings probably bounced a little bit more for the NBA this year is the NFL going to Netflix and their games just not being that good yesterday.
Yeah, I haven't seen the numbers yet for the Netflix. I was kind of curious to see what it was because for those that did watch the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, I punished myself and tuned in for it. Just because I have Netflix and I didn't exactly have as a 40-year-old married man with children, I didn't have a whole lot going on. I think it was either a Friday night or a Saturday night. So I didn't have a whole lot of things distracting my attention that late at night after my kids were in bed. So I did tune in for it, though. I say all that to say, like, that did billions, but that is an international audience. Jake Paul has the biggest podcast in the world. Mike Tyson is one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Mike Tyson is an internationally recognizable face, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, it was kind of standalone on Netflix, so they got a lot of eyes on it. So I'm very, very curious to see what numbers the NFL did, because typically speaking, the NFL dominates, like, especially the American audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it worth going to Netflix and that sort of thing? But also, I think you're right on, dude. Like, I'm curious about those numbers, but I think that having it on a standalone application that you've got to switch back and forth, we have a very short attention span as human beings, especially in 2024 with all of the connectedness that we have for things. I can just pull up whatever my preferred app is, especially if I'm watching fantasy matchups. I can just pull up my fantasy app and see how the game's going. I don't have to change anything on my TV if I've only got one, that sort of thing. So I think you're pretty close to the ground truth in terms of why the NBA had that bounce back. I'll be curious next year on Christmas Day, what day it falls on. I haven't looked at the calendar yet, but is the NFL going to be able to create this kind of standalone thing that they're going to try to do? And are we going to see it on Netflix again? And whether or not the NBA can maintain, right, the ratings from this year, or do we see it kind of drop back to 2023 levels? So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on going forward. However, let's talk Christmas Day games. So we come out the gate with, actually, I got to get this order right. Spurs Knicks, right?
Yeah.
We set some history, man. So Victor Wembanyama, the supernova young guy, everybody's trying to see where his trajectory is going to take him. 7'19" and 20 years old, and taking the league by storm as an international player who can do a lot of things as a big man that we traditionally wouldn't see from guys his size. Scores 40. I think he had 44, if I remember correctly. 41.
42.
42.
Sorry. Yeah.
And then on the opposite side, Mikal Bridges had 41. So they became the first opposing players to have 40 points on Christmas Day. Exciting game, though. Came down to the stretch. Knicks end up pulling this one out. It looks to me, I kind of want to get your thoughts coming out of, especially coming out of this game where the Spurs played what we view as a contender in the East. Played them pretty tough. They've got a lot of exciting young players. I think Sohan is a guy that's going to stick there. Vassell made a lot of plays in that game. But Vic really is, like, his orbit is so big. His gravity is so heavy for that team. Did you learn anything about either of these teams, or do you feel any differently about either of these teams, seeing them matched up on an important day like this, Christmas Day? Because the league told us that they care about these two teams by putting them on Christmas Day.
Yeah, for sure. I did not love. I know 42 points in the Garden on Christmas Day. That's super impressive. Vic shot 16 3-pointers and 31 shots in total and 4 free throws. That's not a winning formula in my mind when you have a 7'6" alien who can just kind of reach the ball up in the air and drop it in the bucket. And pair that with the fact that New York doesn't really have a center.
Yeah.
Why are you shooting 16 3-pointers, Vic? What are we doing here, buddy? I get that you want to expand the range of your game and spread the floor and open things up for other people, but we just saw it not work. You guys lost the game. Maybe it's because Pop's not around. I don't know what's happening. But that just doesn't seem like a winning formula, in my opinion, from a purely basketball standpoint, right? Again, not a coach. don't have aspirations to be an NBA coach. But somebody should probably address that down there. Like, hey, buddy, you're the tallest, freakiest guy on the court. Just touch the paint. Dude. Put 2 feet in the paint, and good things will happen to you. I promise. Vic should average 9, 10 free throws a game just by nature of being so much taller than everyone else. Having him shoot 16 3-pointers was not great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm curious how his game. You mentioned it, right? Like, everyone talks about range, everyone talks about space on the floor, everyone talks about the analytics and how efficient or effective, we'll call it effective, the 3-point shot is, right? Not everybody should be shooting 16 a game.
No.
And Vic is one of those guys that, especially against, you pointed it out, the Knicks don't have a real threat in the middle right now, especially that Vic should have been worried about. He should have been a lot of back to the basket, easy dunks on people's heads for sure. I agree. I wonder too, can they coach that out of him? Because this isn't, I don't think anyway. I watched him play for the French team. I watched him play his rookie season. He does seem like a guy who settles for jump shots a ton. And we've watched Joel Embiid become a guy that settles for jump shots a ton as well. Can they coach it out of him? Do you think it is, when Pop comes back, or, whatever their plan going forward is, do you think they'll try to coach it out of him? And do you think they can coach it out of him?
Yeah, that I was going to say, do they want to coach it out of him is the question that I would ask more so. Can they coach it out of him? Because I think you can. There are hard-headed players in the NBA that you just cannot coach out of things, right? I get that. I don't think Vic is that person. I've never read or seen anything like to support that way of thinking. I feel like he's probably pretty receptive to coaching. I think they're going to kind of want him to do whatever he wants on a basketball court because he is going to be the face of that franchise, probably the NBA here in a couple of years. And he's going to be in contention for MVPs and DPOYs, right? And so they're going to say, hey, Vic, play your game, take whatever the defense gives to you, right? And whether that's 16 3-pointers a game, and I don't think that's a winning formula, they may feel differently, right? They may say, hey, you are so much better than everyone else that if that's what you're seeing the defense give to you, then go ahead and take it. I can't imagine that's going to be what it is, right? Like, I think that they probably will, but granted, they don't have the best supporting cast around him. They're not full of shooters, right? But as Sohan, Jeremy Sohan gets better, whatever his name is, and Castle, when he continues to progress as an offensive player, like, they're going to have more options around Vic in the scoring department that I think will not require him to settle for as many jumpers. But I mean, I agree with you that even on the French national team, he did settle for a lot of things rather than trying to impose his will on the defense. And that may just be something like he doesn't have, his bag is not fully developed yet. Sure. That's potentially something you had mentioned earlier in this Knicks game specifically. He should have been like a lot of back to the basket stuff in the paint. I'm not going to say that I disagree with that, but you don't even have to be back to the basket if you're going to touch the paint, right? Like what do we learn in fucking Pee-wee hoops, dude? Like, if you put 2 feet in the paint, good things happen because you draw the defense in, right? Whether your back is to the basket or not makes no real difference because he could be face up 2 feet in the paint, ball over the head, and the entire court is available to him at that point, right? Because he can see everything. But it's if he's 2 feet in the paint, he shouldn't be taking a fadeaway jumper, right? Like, that's an 8-foot fadeaway is not the shot you want to take unless you're Dirk Nowitzki, and Vic, frankly,
5% on the fadeaway.
Exactly. And Vic is just not that guy. Not yet. Right. I mean, maybe he will become that guy. I don't know. But the settling for jumpers is a little worrisome, in my opinion, regardless of the numbers he's going to put up. Because at some point, if I shot 16 3-pointers in a game, 3 or 4 of them are going to go in, I'll tell you that. And my numbers will be inflated just because of sheer attrition,
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Looking at the other side, so we talked a little bit earlier in the season about how the Knicks had gotten off to a slow start. They made the trade, the big splash trade in the offseason, brought in Karl Anthony Towns, brought in Bridges. We thought it was going to be a full Nova reunion, and then they ended up trading DDV in the Cat trade. But Bridges puts up 41 yesterday. Karl Anthony Towns is actually playing serviceable defense with the Knicks, which I didn't expect.
Yeah.
I thought we might see a little bit of clash of personality with him and Tibbs, but it seems that Cat is pretty well bought into the Tibbs system right now. They still run the shortest rotation fucking possible, and as many minutes as possible for their big superstars. But do you view the Knicks now, 30 games into the season on December 26th, are they better than they were last year, or do you still see them as kind of like a playoff series and out? Are they a threat in the East, I guess is what I'm asking.
Man, that is a tough one. I feel like they're just the same. Like, I don't even feel that the Cat edition was what would be the most impactful, just because of it's a Tibbs team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Bridges when they acquired Mikal Bridges. I apologize, my brain is not functioning highly at the moment.
That's all right.
Yeah, the acquisition of Mikal Bridges, I felt should have been more impactful than the acquisition of Karl Anthony Towns, right? Simply because we know what their offense wants to be. They want it to be Brunson, the point guard, and him getting downhill and then spraying out. But on the defensive side of the ball, because it is Tibbs, we know they play a lot of minutes. We know they play veteran guys, and we know they play super hard on the defensive end. All of those three things are what Mikal Bridges does at a high level, right? He plays 82 games, he plays 40 minutes a night, and he plays super hard on defense. I think that they're probably on the same trajectory as they were last season, even though the squad looks totally different. I mean, second round and out probably feels accurate for this program right now. We'll see whenever Mitchell Robinson comes back and they have a little more flexibility in the front court and can do some different things, because they're going to need at some point, they're going to need a big body to bang with Giannis or to bang with Embiid if they make the playoffs. Or can Cat guard Paolo Banchero? Like, is he going to have to guard Paolo Banchero? I don't know. It's at some point you have to have Mitchell Robinson for a matchup that you're going to face down the road. There will be somebody you have to face down the road that you need a big man for. And I just don't know if Cat, regardless of how well he's playing right now on defense, is going to be that big body for you.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like that take. I think the trajectory feels the same, even though it's a very, very different team.
Mm-hmm.
Back to this question. I missed the comment section here. That's on me. But I think that Netflix felt like they had a couple of good matchups. The games just didn't go that way, right? You mentioned the Chiefs are boring this year. Very boring this year. Like they grind. Mahomes goes down and sets them up for a game-winning field goal or a game-winning touchdown at the end of the game. They win by a score. Didn't happen yesterday because Pittsburgh's offense stunk bad. And I think the Baltimore-Houston matchup, if you asked me before the season, I would have thought on December 25th it would have been a good matchup. It just didn't turn out that way. 31-3 is not a good matchup. So I think they had good matchups, but I think the way the season is played out, they became not so great matchups to put on Netflix. Unfortunately for Netflix, but I mean they'll wipe away their tears with $100 bills. So
yeah,
they're doing all right. But moving on, we had the early afternoon slot, or I guess mid-afternoon slot, 76ers and Celtics. And oddly enough, like Joel Embiid almost missed this game because in warm-ups he like tumbled into the front row and like twisted his ankle. Ends up playing, and the Sixers get a big win, and they've been 8-3 in their last 11, so like their record is starting to look better. I asked you this earlier, and I'm going to ask you again on the pod because that's what we're talking about here. Are the Sixers okay, or are they still not okay, even winning 8 of their last 11?
I mean, okay. Let's see. They are okay. Are they like they're
They're
fine?
only okay.
Yeah, like they're only okay. You know, I worry about them 2 years from now when they're still paying Paul George and they're still paying Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
But I would assume they're like a play-in team in the East. Maybe they can sneak into a 6 seed, at 5 seed, potentially avoid some of the mess at the beginning of the postseason. But they're not a real contender to come out of the East at this moment. Paul George has been fucking bad since he came over to Philly. I mean, he robbed that city blind. I don't know. I'm not sure how they didn't see that one coming, but
yikes. Yeah.
Whatever. That's the cost of doing business with superstars. It's sometimes they just get old fast,
Yep.
So they're okay. They're okay.
They're only okay.
Yeah, like I would not be worried about seeing them in a playoff matchup. Do you know that Embiid's going to miss a game and a half, and like that's just how that's going to go.
Paul George
right now,
the entire series.
Yeah, like their best, most consistent player right now is Tyrese Maxey, and as electrifying as he is on a basketball court, I'm not sure he's a guy that's going to win you a playoff series. Like right now, a couple years from now maybe, but at this exact moment, I don't think so.
He's not the rising tide right now.
No, probably not.
On the other side, why do the Celtics do this? There's like a handful of times throughout a season, and maybe it's just boredom. That could be the right answer. There's like a handful of times throughout a season where we see them like just lay an egg, and this feels like one of those. You're in the spotlight on Christmas Day. You're at home against a rival team, right? Philly and Boston. It's a bit of a rivalry. It might not be the most heated, but it's a bit of a rivalry. And you're so flat, and like you're down, what is it, 8 at half, and you start to close the gap in the third quarter, and then you just fourth quarter we're going to stop playing defense. Like, what the hell? What's going on with the Celtics? Is this just another one of those blips, or like should we now be worried about this team in the playoffs?
It's the championship hangover, right? Like we see it all the time in sports. This team, in my opinion, did not win an NBA championship because they have championship medal. They won the NBA championship because they had so much more talent than everybody else did, right? Like Jason Tatum is the same player this year that he was last year. He's the same guy that we saw get DMPs in the Olympics playing against the world's best.
Yeah.
Like, I should be a huge Jason Tatum fan, and it's very well documented that I'm just not, because he just doesn't have it for me. Mm-hmm. And this game was not lost because of Jason Tatum.
Sure.
But what Jason Tatum doesn't have is the ability to bring everybody else up with him, right? He scored 32. Awesome. Hey, Peyton Pritchard, don't go 1 for 9. Like, you played 33 minutes, went 1 for 9, 0 for 8 from 3. That's not good enough, bud.
Right.
If you're going to play 33 minutes off the bench, you have to be a spark. That's kind of what your role is on this team. You dog on defense, and you provide a spark on the offensive side of the court. Like, Porzingis is back. He's being worked in. He started. He played 13 minutes, but like, they're bringing him back, trying to get him fully healthy. This team, like I said, they didn't win because they have championship medal last year. They won because they had so much more talent than everybody else. And I feel the same way about this year's team. They just, I don't know. They don't. You said it perfectly. They're flat, like that. Yep. They just kind of always are, and they shoot a million fucking threes, and most of the time they make a lot of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you don't, games like this happen.
Yep, for sure. All right, into the prime time. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a game. That's why I said early afternoon. I skipped the fucking early afternoon window and jumped right to 76ers Celtics. Before the 76ers and Celtics tipped off, we had the Timberwolves and Mavericks. The T-Wolves come out of this with a 105-99 6-point win on the road against Dallas. We have made it clear that we're not necessarily believers in the T-Wolves this year. Unfortunately, we do have some bad news that comes out of this game. Luka Doncic goes down and is expected to miss. I heard the word significant time uttered from some of the NBA folks. So unfortunately for Dallas, they're going to be without one of, if not maybe we can talk ourselves into him being the best player in the world. It wouldn't be a long stretch to say that because he's just that goddamn good. But they're going to be without him for a while. So they're going to lean heavily on Kyrie to be the primary playmaker on that team, probably. And they're going to be without one of the best in the world for a little bit. They are in a good spot in terms of like they're 8 games above 500. So if he does miss a few weeks, you're in a tough West, but you've got a little bit of a cushion in terms of like the 500 mark, if you will. How do the Mavericks survive without Luka? Is it really just Kyrie's got to play better, or do you see somebody else on that roster that, or another way that they're going to be able to make up for it? Because it's a roster that is, let's be honest, it is constructed that Luka is the guy and Kyrie is Robin to Luka's Batman, and then it's a bunch of guys that kind of complement what Luka does. It's a lot of lobs, it's a lot of good rebounders, it's a few shooters around him. How do they soften this blow over the next few weeks?
Certainly.
Or is it just treading water and they got to survive?
Well, I think that's probably the most likely outcome, right? Is they just need to tread water, probably go 500 while he's out and kick it back into high gear when he comes back onto the court. But if you're looking for a way that they can excel when he's not there, right? It's defensively. They're going to have to ramp up the defense when he's not there because he is better now on Luka is better now on defense than he was when he first came in, right? But he's still like just an average NBA defender. Kyrie's going to have to elevate his game a little bit. He played really well yesterday. Yeah, I thought at least they didn't lose because of Kyrie's effort. I think Clay is a guy you look to be a little more of a contributor with Luka not there. That's a scary thought if you're the Mavericks, because he very, very clearly has lost like 2 steps since being the superstar that he was in Golden State. Yeah, so I think the most likely outcome is they just try. Well, they're going to try to excel, but like they're going to just kind of maintain, and then if they can get better play out of like Najee Marshall or I don't know, Derek Lively does anything other than block shots and rebound and catch lobs, that'd be sick. And if Clay can figure something out, harken back to his days of being a star in the NBA, that would really help them. But it's on the defensive side of the court, in my opinion. That's how they're going to have to make it through this stretch without Luka Doncic.
Yeah. I wonder how much we're going to see Jason Kidd get creative with lineups too. Are we going to see Gafford and Lively on the floor together more often, maybe, to help stiffen some of that defense on the back end? And both of those guys can kind of play the matchup game when you can't necessarily just pick and roll and pick off one of them and expect to just blow by them, right? They are guys that can defend big and small. So maybe you get a little creative with that. But yeah, I think Clay is a name that probably, and maybe Kyrie's going to have to step up and be a bit more of a rising tide, right? Maybe he's going to have to be a guy that can bring guys along with him instead of kind of playing the Robin role with Luka when Luka's healthy. So we'll see for sure. On the other side, the T-Wolves, anything to take away with them? Because there are large stretches, and even in this game, despite them winning this game, there are large stretches of the game that it's like, I don't know what Minnesota's doing.
Yeah.
I can't make sense of, they just don't seem to have like a concentrated like scheme. I don't necessarily want to say scheme, but like the offense just seems so disjointed. And you mentioned Anthony Edwards settling for a lot more jump shots now. And I think that's a product of kind of like, there's no like concerted, cohesive approach on the offensive end. And it's weird because like, not what I expected from them after the last few years, but when you trade for a guy like Julius Randle, who's he's a fucking parquet pounder, as much as anybody at that position in the league, and Ant-Man just settling so much. I don't know, what is there any hope for Minnesota? Is this just kind of what we're going to get from them the whole way? Maybe they're a playing team at the end of the year.
Yeah, they are a confounding team to try to figure out.
Yeah.
I think so. My best guess here is, you mentioned it, the Julius Randle thing. He's a ball stopper, so it's tough to have like a movement and passing based offense when you have a guy like that who plays so many minutes and demands so many shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pair that with them, they don't really have a table setter for that offense. Like, I know Mike Conley's still there and he's fine, but at this point he's not a high level point guard in the NBA anymore.
Right.
And Ant's not a point guard. He just is not. So that they don't really have somebody to get them into their offensive sets and make everything flow maybe nicely in the way we would like to see it done. So they have enough talent on that roster. They're not going to be as good as they were last year, right? They're not making the Western Finals, but they should be fine. They could probably get in, and Ant might go nuclear and win them a first round matchup. I don't expect that to be the case, but I do expect them to make the actual playoffs. And if they make the play-in, then to win in the play-in and make it to the actual playoffs, like I said.
Play it
Yeah, the playoffs, yeah. I think they'll be all right.
Okay. Yeah. Ceiling's pretty low for them, though.
Mm-hmm.
In the first of our later matchups, our kind of primetime window here with the Lakers and Warriors, we had an exciting finish, man. We get the double bang from Mike Green when Steph hit the game tying shot, and then we get Austin Reeves making the game winner for the Lakers. Lakers take the dub here over the Dubs, 115-113 on the road. LeBron had 31 and 10. Steph had 38 and 6. We got the superstar treatment in this game. Other than the fact that street clothes ended up in street clothes by the end of the game. But we got a great finish from two of the marquee franchises right now in the NBA and two of the marquee superstars that have ever played this game. It felt like before the game, it did feel like there was a lot of I don't want to say finality, but there was a lot of we know we're about to go out to pasture from KD, who played in the later of the evening games, LeBron and Steph from that interview that they had with, I think, was it Malika? Somebody interviewed them, and I think it was Malika, or was it Monica McNutt? One of them two interviewed that trio. And if this is the send-off we get, I don't know that both of them are going to retire at the end of the season, but if this is the sort of stuff to expect from these guys as they wind down their career, I'm here for it because that was a fun game, man. That was a really fun game. The finish especially was super exciting. We got Steph, we got LeBron, both in the 30s. That was a really fun game. I hate to say we're coming to the end of this era because it's really been a fun, superstar heavy era, and we've talked a lot about we don't know who's going to pick up the torch and run with it.
Yeah.
But feels like they're going to give us everything they can on their way out the door.
Yeah, 1,000%, man. It had a lot of that feel to it of this is the last big matchup between these two guys that have dominated basketball for the last 15 years,
Yeah.
LeBron probably more so dominated the face of basketball than Steph, but Steph with all those championships and the shooting records and everything, it really did feel like, hey, we may not get this again from these two guys, so go ahead and enjoy this one on Christmas Day. And then Austin Reeves stole the show with the game winner and a triple-double.
Yep.
Anthony Davis being out, it's kind of bound to happen, right? There's things you expect from him.
It's another NBA season, and Anthony Davis is missing time.
Yeah, right. But the game, like you said, it was incredible. The ending was electric. These are the games that the NBA wishes they had every single night.
Yeah.
There is some version of this every night in the NBA because there is so much talent right now. But to see it on the big stage, that was really cool. It was a classic, Christmas Day, welcome to the league. This season has officially arrived.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think we are starting to see him run out of gas. We've talked about it a lot this year. Father Time is undefeated. LeBron has done better than maybe anybody ever at kind of punching him in the face as many times as possible to keep him from taking him down.
Yep.
But it's the legs, I think, are the big thing. And you highlighted it In terms of just the defensive end, he just doesn't have the gas to put the effort in there. He's focusing on the stat counting on the offensive end, and the defensive end is what suffers because he just doesn't have the deep reserve gas tank that he's always had throughout his career. It's been unbelievable what he's been able to do in terms of pushing off the inevitability of time. But again, it's inevitable, and I think we're getting close to that point. I don't know. I'll be curious. We don't have to get into it right now, but I'm just going to throw this out there as like a speculative thought. I don't know if we're ever going to see LeBron be what Jordan was at the end of his career, where like he kind of mentored and brought along a team and didn't necessarily take the spotlight, but he would still show us flashes every once in a while. Or like there'd be a night where the Wizards would be, behind by 15, and he'd, all right, guys, get on my back. Yeah. We're gonna do this one more time, and we'd see the flashes of the early 90s and mid 90s Jordan for a little bit. I don't know if LeBron's ever going to be that. I think LeBron is going to have his swan song tour, and we're going to see him in media, and I think he's going to make the move pretty quickly. I think he'll make his decision, and it'll just be that.
Yeah, probably. I would expect farewell tour of some sorts for him.
Yeah, I think we'll get the full Monty next year probably. If I had to guess, I think next year will be his swan song, and we'll get the send off in every city. We cap off the night with Nuggets Suns, and this thing started out like fucking gangbusters. 72 points in the first quarter. I had the under in this game, and I was sweating bullets after the first quarter. Number was 232, and I was watching the live number as the first quarter went. It got as high as like 243.5, and I was like, shit, I'm in trouble with this under. When you're almost a dozen points over my line, I had some airtight moments there early in the game, but both defenses kind of buckled down. The shooting went to shit for the middle part of this game. And then the fourth quarter got kind of tight as the Nuggets were trying to make a run. The Suns fending them off, though. Got a 10-point win here to close out the night for the Suns. They get over 500. Nuggets continue to scuffle a bit. They just don't have a supporting cast right now. You posed the great question at the beginning of the season, and I didn't have a great answer. Like, who's the second best scorer on this team? It's December 26th, and I don't think we have an answer to that question yet. That answer at the end of the season might not be on the roster right now, and we're going to talk about some trade news in a little bit. But talk to me, Suns, Nugs. Suns at times looked like maybe they were starting to develop some chemistry there with their superstars, but it's so fleeting at times. They seem to just go to iso ball way too much.
Yeah, this was the most surprising outcome from yesterday, in my opinion. The Suns come in without Devin Booker and get a 10-point win over the best player in the world. Yep. They got a pretty good game out of Michael Porter Jr. Jamal Murray struggled to shoot the ball. He didn't even shoot that much, but like that's kind of the common theme with him the last like 2 seasons, really, is like he just is not scoring the ball the way you need him to. But yeah, like you mentioned it. It came out super hot, starting right out of the gate, and then it just was downhill and felt like a rock fight. Felt almost like college basketball game, like coming down the stretch there. Yeah. It's like if we were watching all the best players, but just playing in college, It was the Suns. They just have so much talent, man. Like they're one of the few teams in the NBA where you are almost okay with them going to like hero ball, because whenever Booker's there, they have 3 guys that you feel pretty comfortable giving the ball to and saying, hey, get us a bucket.
Yeah.
Including the greatest to ever do that in Kevin Durant. Like, hey, we have to have a bucket. All right, here's Kevin. He's just going to score it every time.
Yeah.
And conversely, maybe the most conversely you can get is Denver, where they just don't have that. They've got one guy, and he makes everything happen.
Yep.
And if he is not hitting like on all cylinders, the it just struggles, And Nikola played well yesterday. They just didn't have enough gas to close it, regain the lead, right, and close it out down the stretch. And that's, I hate to say it, that's just kind of how the season goes for Denver at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Jokic can bring them only so far. I mean, they're still 4 games over 500, but that's in a tough West. You're looking at being like the 6th or even a play-in team when you're only 4 games over 500. So it's going to be tough for them. Yeah, with Phoenix, like it seemed like in the first quarter, Durant and Beal like had this thing going where they were kind of playing off each other. Beal was hot as fish grease coming out in the first quarter, and he still finished with a good game. Durant finished, it's Kevin Durant, but it cooled off, and they just seemed to really kind of just get stuck in the mud at times. I don't know how much that was the Nugs kind of clamping down on defense versus maybe they ran out of gas when it came to that real fast-paced first quarter might have been too much when you're really focused on 2 guys kind of taking the mantle for you. But when they got Book, you nailed it on the head. Like you got 3 guys, you can just say, hey, go get us a bucket. Maybe it works when they're fully healthy, but they seem to get a little stymied in the second and third quarter, especially in this game. Coming out of that, I want to talk a little bit because we had some speculation, and I don't know how many people watched the pregame with Perk, and he was giving out Christmas gifts for NBA teams. This might have been the pregame, or it might have been the night before on the NBA show on ESPN. But Perk was giving out gifts, and he gave the Nuggets a gift. And I'm going to use this as our jumping pad into our next topic. Trade deadlines come in. It's going to be trade season here soon. We're going to really be talking about the heating up of trades in the NBA. Usually one of the more active trade deadlines of the four major professional sports franchises across football, baseball, basketball, hockey. Basketball is usually the most active around the trade deadline. So Perk said that De'Aaron Fox would be a good fit going to the Nuggets. Now, he didn't build a trade like we would normally do in terms of like, this is what they would give up, this is what they would get back. But we know De'Aaron Fox has a pretty big contract. We know the Nuggets don't have a ton of like valuable draft capital because you don't think that with Jokic on board, they're going to just tank and those are going to be lottery picks. So just assuming across the board things get even, do you think De'Aaron Fox would be a good fit with a guy like Nikola Jokic in Denver?
Gary, I think every player in the NBA is a good fit with Nikola Jokic. There's not a player you can put on that roster I don't think would be a good fit with him. I don't know. I'm not sure what they have to send back to Sacramento that would make it worth it for Sacramento, really. You mentioned the draft capital. I don't have their war chest sitting in front of me, so I don't know for sure what they've got. But, like, is Peyton Watson and Christian Brown? I mean, my assumption is that Jamal Murray has to be in this deal, right? Like, that's kind of how that's going to end up.
I was just looking at his, like, what he's 28, 29. Like, it's not even an expiring contract either.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would love to see that happen, right? That'd be super cool. You inject some speed and some instant offense into that team there in Denver. But again, I don't know what they would send back from Denver to make that happen. Now, if they're super motivated, they can figure something out, I'm sure. I have another franchise that I think would benefit greatly, maybe even more so than Denver of a De'Aaron Fox trade. I'm looking at San Antonio. Put De'Aaron Fox down there in San Antonio. I think now you're cooking with grease.
Yeah. I think that'd be a really good fit. I think the combination of what he can do with what Vic can offer you, especially on the defensive end where De'Aaron Fox is not a stud. Right. Vic makes up for a lot of that, but also on the offensive end, a guy that can just go get a bucket. You mentioned the supporting cast in San Antonio. You're not sure, right? Is Sohan part of the future? Is Vassell? Is Stephon Castle? We know Chris Paul's not. So who's going to be that guy long term to take over the point guard position, right? Mm-hmm. I think they hope it's Stephon Castle, but we don't know yet, right? Jury's out. Having a guy approving, I like that. I like that fit, and I think that could instantly make them move from like play-in, maybe fringe play-in, to potentially getting into the, as you put it, the real playoffs. Maybe they get into the top 6 where they're guaranteed a playoff series. I like that. You mentioned breaking news before the show that Pat Riley has come out and said the Heat are not trading Jimmy Butler. So I'm going to ask it to you this way, because we don't know what the hell goes on in these phone calls. But which do you think is more likely the reason for Riles to come out and say that? Do you think it's because he's trying to drive value, or do you think it's because they've gotten nowhere near what they want to get out of Jimmy Butler?
Oh, I think it's because I think it's because the offers suck.
Yeah.
I think it's the latter.
I agree with you.
We
talked about it last week or the week before. Like, what would you give up for a 35-year-old guy who's we already said, like, he'd be looking to get another contract. Like, what would you be willing to give up for that? Knowing full well that he's probably on the free agent market this offseason. So unless you're really like on the brink and you think Jimmy Butler is what's going to put you over the top to win a title, how much are you actually going to be willing to give up? And the Heat are going to want to get some future assets, right? It's possible lottery picks. It's young guys that you've recently drafted that have high ceilings, that sort of thing. I don't know. Are you willing to give up those guys for Jimmy Eat World?
Not me.
Yeah,
I'm good on that. I like Jimmy Butler a lot, but Father Time, man, we talk about it.
Yep.
It's Jimmy's up there, dude. Jimmy's up there, and he hasn't really delivered in the playoffs the last 2 years. And
he's not having a great year this year either.
Yeah.
All right. I want to kind of pose the open-ended piece of this discussion for the trade cycle that should be heating up here soon. Is there a team or teams or a player or players that we haven't talked about and we haven't necessarily heard a lot about that you think could either be a splash player in the trade market, and that could be either getting a guy or giving up a guy, or a player that we might see move that we wouldn't necessarily expect?
Zach LaVine, go to the Lakers, bud. You want to be there. They want you there. Like, again, the money and all that stuff, I'm not sure exactly how that works out, but Chicago needs to take it down, break it down, blow it up, start over. Just go with your young guys. Zach LaVine does not – I mean, he fits from a basketball standpoint because he's the best player on the team, but it would be valuable for him to go somewhere where he can play real meaningful games, and it'd be valuable for the Lakers to go out and get him because, again, with AD going down, he can come in and inject offense into that squad. It just kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think so too. If you're going to maximize this final window that you have with LeBron, and if you expect Anthony Davis to be able to be available when the playoffs come along, LaVine's a good fit. Guy who can fill the bucket, still has a little bit of juice left in the legs. Not the guy he was, 2019, 2020, 2021 Zach LaVine, but still a guy that can get you a bucket. Still a reliable guy, veteran, and I think he's dying to be on a winning franchise. Took that payday with Chicago. Good for him. Got his bag. But that roster, I think Ryan may be the loudest of the people saying the Bulls are just like the poster child for the in-between team. Not good enough to make a run in the playoffs. Not bad enough to get those lottery picks. And rebuild a franchise around a veteran like a Zach LaVine. So, I think that'd be really interesting. In terms of them making that move.
Can I offer you another player?
Absolutely.
Who is not in the NBA that we could see cause and effect from in this year's trade deadline?
Ooh, I like where your head's at.
Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
Is not in the NBA.
Yep. But
come July, right? Is July the draft?
I think it's July, yeah.
He will be in the NBA.
Yep.
There are teams that want Cooper Flagg on their team very badly.
Mm-hmm.
and may be willing to part ways with players currently on their roster in
Who
order
aren't
to
helping them improve their odds.
exactly. There could be teams looking to move players to better position themselves for
Yeah.
Cooper Flag.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. I'm curious. There's one team that I'm really curious right now whether or not they're going to try to make a move because the East is so bad right now. The Detroit Pistons have been so bad for so long. I don't know that I believe there'll be players in the trade market, but they intrigue me a bit because Cade Cunningham is finally getting close to what they thought they were getting when they drafted him. If he can continue to stay healthy, maybe they look at it and say we want to capitalize on this because we haven't been able to yet. In a very, very bad East, I was looking at like somewhere between 5 and 11, 12, 15, 11, 12, 13. Like I just don't. The Heat are looking to move Jimmy Butler potentially. Maybe the Bucks make a move, but they're pretty strapped. The Hawks, I don't think they're ready to go all in on a season. The Pacers are a strange team. I just don't think they have I don't think they have the flexibility with the roster to be able to move.
Sure.
Bulls moving off Zach LaVine most likely, and then the Sixers, I don't think they have the flexibility to move really. And then after that, like Nets, Hornets, neither of them are really invested in this year. They might be one of those teams that is in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes.
Yeah.
Cam Johnson
might be moved out of Brooklyn.
They might be, yeah, right. Cam Johnson could be a guy. They might be trying to move their better players to get as bad as possible down the stretch. I looked at the Pistons and I was like, maybe a franchise that has been in the doldrums for so long. I don't know. I'm just intrigued by it. I don't think they're going to, but it'd be interesting if they decided they were going to make a move and bring in a vet guy to put next to Cade, because however you feel about Cade, I know Ryan's pretty high on Cade. I'm very down on Cade, but if you're ever going to make that move to try to capitalize on a season that Cade's having, you finally have one.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest, but it's his greatest, right? Like, he's as good as he's ever been in the NBA. Maybe they make a move around him. I don't know. I was just intrigued by the East is bad enough that maybe it's one of those teams that thinks they can go host a playoff series or something. Not win the East, but maybe try to sneak up there in the 4, 5, 6 area.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, they're not bad enough to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes right now, but they're also not good enough to really be a playoff team.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, they've been so bad for so long. Like, why not at this point? They got Tobias Harris's contract. They could probably ship that out for something. Yeah. Maybe one or if Jaden Ivey seems unhappy, I don't know. I don't know the inner workings of that franchise there, but
sure,
if you can package something like that together and maybe a pick, you go out and bring in a Jimmy Butler or Levine or Cam Johnson from Brooklyn. I don't know who the guy's going to be, but it would make sense to me if Detroit tries to do that.
Yeah. Cam Johnson might be a good move too, because you can look at that and say, oh, we've got a couple of years with a guy that's that young, right? Levine and Butler, you're looking at, we've got this year and maybe next that we're going to try to maximize the value on it. So you got anything else in the chamber in terms of the trade market that you're intrigued by?
I mean, does Vucevic, if Chicago decides to move off of Levine, does Vucevic also end up somewhere else? Is that I am intrigued by Milwaukee. I don't know what they can do. I don't know if they can do anything.
Yeah, that roster feels pretty rigid.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a team that they still they're the 5 seed and they have one of the 2 best players in the world right now.
Yeah.
It feels like they should do something, right? It just kind of feels that way.
Yep, I agree. I'm intrigued. I wish Ryan were here because I'm intrigued by the Rockets right now as we approach the deadline. I still don't know if they've decided who's going to be on their roster in 2026. So maybe they're still a year out from really kind of feeling like they need to be players at the deadline. But you're sitting at 20-9 right now, and you're number 2 seed in the West currently. Like, it sort of feels like the same situation we talked about with the Thunder last year. They've got a lot of young assets, and maybe it's shit or get off the pot time and try to make a run at this thing in the West. But I don't know how much they feel the same way we feel about the Thunder in the West. Maybe it's like OKC and Houston's like, we'll try to get them next year. I don't know.
Yeah.
But at 20-9, I wish Ryan were here to get his thoughts, because he's our resident Rockets fan, and kind of maybe set our compasses in terms of what the feeling in the locker room, the feeling in the organization is for all of these young players, and kind of where they fit and how they move forward, and what the trajectory is, and whether or not they'd be players at the deadline.
Yeah, similar. I guess not similar, but also in the West, Golden State.
Sure.
Talked multiple times about how Steve Kerr is still like kind of figuring out this rotation.
Yeah.
They play so many dudes on any given night that, like, are they auditioning them? Are they trying to get good tape out there? Or are they actually trying to figure out their rotation? Like, what are we doing? Are they going to try to squeeze one more out of Steph and Draymond? I don't know what Golden State's going to do, honestly, but I'm excited to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Oh, all right, Bub. Well, that kind of covers our agenda we had set for tonight. Any closing thoughts here as we progress past Christmas Day and the de facto start of the NBA season, as you put
it? Stop shooting so many threes, dude. Play basketball. Please.
Agreed.
No,
I will say this as kind of a last parting thought on our discussion from last week, which we've continued a little bit this week in terms of the watchability. I'm in a group chat with some very, very, very casual NBA fans, and I can't tell you how many times they've said, like, this game is so hard to watch because of it's just like it's a horse game. It's a 3-point shooting contest at both ends. They need to, I think, for the sake of the game, maybe not necessarily for the sake of organizations, because we've talked pretty extensively about, like, the analytics saying this is the way to win games, and it's kind of played out, right? Like, they're not wrong because of the effectiveness of the 3-point shot versus a 2-point shot, but for the sake of the game, I think they've got to come up with something creative. Ryan mentioned maybe dunks were 3. We've mentioned, we've talked about taking away offensive goaltending, making it so maybe there's a bit more action around the rim, as opposed to stand around, tip out, take another 3, right?
Yep.
Like, if the ball comes off the rim, it's a tip out and somebody's shooting another 3. Take away offensive goaltending, and maybe we end up with a bit more activity around the rim, and the game feels a little more kind of up pace. Pace pace can be a very deceiving thing. I think baseball, and last thing before I get off my soapbox here, but I think baseball did well in terms of changing the pace of the game with the pitch clock. Basketball, we're at an all-time high in terms of, like, pace of the. I don't want to say all-time, because there's like some ABA times in the 70s and whatnot where, like, everything was just fucking nuclear up and down the floor. But in our lifetime, we're at a high in terms of, like, the pace back and forth up the floor, but it's like the game is played within, like, 35 feet from, like, arch to arch, right? Like, the top of the key to the top of the key is kind of where the game is played, and that's not necessarily the pace that we want. So yeah, let's try to encourage a little more activity around the rim, and we might start to get more of that healthy pace to the game of basketball. And yeah, we have, we've got to beat the dead horse, but
we have. Sorry for even mentioning it.
yeah. But anyway, good episode, bud. Appreciate you. Appreciate the dad tuning in, getting the comments. Those of you all that tuned in as well. As we did earlier on Tailgate, want to wish everybody happy holidays. Hope everybody had a great Christmas. Enjoy the new year. Appreciate you all tuning in, and we will see you on the other side.
You want to give an NFL pick?
Oh yes, we do actually. We need to. It's Thursday night. We do have NFL action tonight. We've got Seattle traveling to Chicago. Let me see what the line closed at. 4.5. I think that's gone down. a half point. I think they were -5 at one point this week. I could be wrong about that. But I see it sitting at 4.5 right now. Who you got in this one? Seattle at Chicago, -4.5 in favor of the visiting Seahawks, a Chicago team that since the Hail Mary has been very, very, very bad. They've lost in unique ways.
Yeah, they've been finding new ways to lose. I'm going to go Seattle here. I'll lay the points.
At risk of sounding like a complete idiot before halftime, I'm going to go on just a gut feeling. I think Chicago's going to get a win tonight. The NFC West has been very weird this year, and I think tonight's going to be a continuation of that. Seattle's going to really put a dent in their playoff hopes with a kind of laying an egg here at Chicago tonight. So give me Chicago money line.
Okay.
Get a little juice on that. Don't bet the mortgage because it is the fucking Bears. But if you're feeling frisky like I am, if the Bears can show up a little bit, that offensive line maybe plays a little better. We'll see. I'm sure by halftime I'll be tearing my ticket up, but I'm going out on a limb, gut feeling with the Bears tonight.
If you did not lose all of your money betting on the NBA yesterday, like I did, go ahead and bet on the Bears.
It was a tough one. Yesterday.
Just really threaded that needle, tried to hedge, and threaded that fucking needle.
I've done that before. I know that feeling. It's a dark place to be. It's a dark place to be when you try to hedge against your own bet, and you end up right in the middle where you lose both.
Yep, unfortunate.
Yeah, brutal. But all right, bud. Well, for Bentley and everybody here at Backyard Sports, this has been Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are out.